Now I got a question about tidal rivers that I'm going to answer today, and the question was worded somewhat like this. You're in the south, it's hot, the water's hot, high 80s, low 90s, you're fishing tidal rivers, you can get bit in the morning, but once the sun comes up, it gets hot, the water heats up, or the tide slows down, it's very difficult to get bit. So what's the answer to that? What's the solution to countering those conditions in the summertime? Well, first let me say, if you like my channel, please hit the subscribe button, like it, make a comment in the bottom. It'll help me grow the channel so I can bring more information like this to you. So that being said, I have a video out there posted right here that talks about pretty much everything about tidal rivers in summertime. But there are some strategies that you can use in the situations that this particular question involves. And one of the most difficult things about this question is when the tide stops moving in the summertime, basically the fish are going to stop feeding. But what I have found in years of fishing tidal rivers is when the water is really hot and you don't get that morning bite, or you get that morning bite and you really can't count on getting anything else during the day, that last hour or so right before low tide, the fish will almost always feed a little bit. Maybe not hard, but they always feed a little bit. And then that first hour or two of incoming tide, those fish will always feed a little bit. And you know, in hot water situations, these fish are stressed and they're probably just not going to feed a whole lot under these circumstances. Low light, tide turns. That's when you're going to get most of the bites, and the rest of the day is going to be pretty difficult. So how do you counter that? How do you catch fish when the tide has stopped and the fish aren't biting anymore? Well, there's an old technique that a lot of us use on tidal rivers that works, and it's called running the tide. So what you want to do, you're going to have to burn a little gas, is when that tide starts to slow down and you realize that the fish have stopped biting, you need to move upriver and get the same tide that you just got when they were biting. It may be, depending on the width of your river and the length of your river, you know, it may be a 15-minute run or a 5-minute run to get back to that. So what we do here a lot is we jump that tide. We jump that tide, stay ahead of that bad tide. And then, you know, finally it's going to catch up to you sooner or later. And then there's not a whole lot you can do about it other than, you know, go back down river, get on some flat somewhere where you know the fish live and grind it out. Another thing you can do in these situations, hot water, the tide stops moving, is find the biggest, shadiest areas that you have and fish them extremely thoroughly, because those fish are going to gravitate to large shade areas when it's really, really hot and they don't have a lot of flow. So do that. And the two ways to get them would be finessing them out with a shaky head, a Senko, a Nico rig, or to go the opposite direction and speed up with a crankbait or a heavy flipping object, something that's going to bounce into their face and you get that reaction strike from them. But what happens a lot of times in a lot of these, you know, low flow rivers is these fish will come to the bank in optimal situation and feed. And the rest of the day, they just drop off of the bank into some hole somewhere behind some rock, behind some log, next to some spring hole or something that you may or may not know is down there. And they're just going to basically quit until the situation gets better again for them, low light conditions again, or the tide speeds up and the bait starts coming to them. They get that oxygen that they need. Now, if you have on your particular river, you know, little side creeks, you know, I think of, you know, like the Sabine River here, where Jason Christie last year ran, you know, about as far as he could run to get to a little side creek. And that little side creek had a lot of flow in it and a good amount of depth and a lot of turns with a lot of shade, and probably had cool water. And a lot of these side creeks that you find in these rivers are spring fed, and most of the time the water temperature in the side creeks is several degrees cooler than it is in the main body of river. And you get in situations in these main body of river in the summertime that not only is the water hot and uncomfortable for the fish, so then they're only going to feed under premium circumstances, is you get the pleasure boaters and a lot of boat traffic going, and that really kind of just gets the fish out of position to where you can, with your eyes and a target, really kind of to hit them, and they'll pull off the bank. Now if you can, with your side imaging, find something off of the bank, you know, like on a drop on an edge. Now the fish that are out in the channel, you're not catching them. You're not going to catch them in a tidal river. They're done. They're neutral. But any fish that you can find like on the edge of a drop off, around a piece of structure, a log, a rock, a hard turn, things like that, and you know, less than 8 foot of water or so, and the water's not too dirty, you can catch those fish. And that may be where, you know, some of those fish that you're catching on the bank in the morning with top waters or whatever you may be fishing in the morning, where they drop off to. So, you know, if you got a lot of fish in an area on the bank in the morning, then they seem to disappear, then I would kind of search around that particular area out away on the edge where it starts to drop into the channel of the river, and see if you can't find some type of structure out there that those fish are holding on. Now if the current's too strong in your particular river, they're not going to do that. They're going to stay tight to the bottom somewhere, and they won't get out on that channel edge at all. But that is an option also. So the best plan in hot water river tournament fishing scenarios is be at your best places at the best time of the day. If you've got a best area that you want to be there at the right time of day. You're not going to be able to count on a lot of other stuff once the tide gets bad, once the water heats up, once the sun gets out, and you don't have another lot of shady options, side creeks and things like that, or slightly offshore stuff to count on. So be at your best stuff, and you know that's how you're going to succeed in those situations. I mean, most of the tournaments that I win on tidal rivers, it's not an all-day thing. It's a 1 hour or 2 hours you get the fish that you need to win the tournament, and then you spend 6 hours grinding. That's just kind of the way tidal rivers are laid out. You know, on a lake where you can get, and you know the fish are offshore and they're stacked up in big schools and things like that, and you can just go through them for a long period of time on different spots. On a river, it's just not going to be that way. The tide will dictate when they feed, and they're just not going to feed under bad situations, bad circumstances, you know, tide wise, or even, you know, temperature heat wise. So be at your best places at the right tides, or first thing in the morning if that's when you're getting bit, and then grind it out the rest of the day, or run the tides. That's the answer to that question. So anyhow, thanks for watching, and have a blessed day.